From the outside, we looked like everything people dreamed of becoming. A white-laced wedding album sat on our coffee table, its glossy pages filled with frozen laughter, golden sunlight, and the kind of happiness that neighbors pointed to with envy. Clara in her silk dress, me in my suit, our smiles wide enough to blind anyone who dared look closer. They said we were perfect. Told myself we were. But perfection isn't love. Perfection is control. Clara was mine the moment she said yes. I replayed her vows often in my head, every promise stitched into me like scripture. Forever, she whispered at the altar, her voice soft enough to tremble. I believed her. More than that, I needed her to mean it. Because what was I without her? The house we bought together became our stage. A neat lawn, trimmed hedges, warm lights glowing at dusk. Everything about it said stability, belonging. Inside, I arranged the furniture just as she wanted, painted the walls her favorite shade, framed our photos on every shelf. And yet behind those smiling portraits, I watched her eyes carefully. Sometimes they lingered too long on the window. Sometimes her laughter faltered too quickly. I told myself it was nothing. Still, the thought clawed at me. What if her forever wasn't the same as mine? At neighborhood gatherings, people noticed how tightly I held her hand, how often I reminded them she was my wife. They laughed politely, assuming I was just proud. But pride wasn't it. It was fear. The fear that if I loosened my grip, she might slip away. Daniel, she once said with that faint smile, you love me too much. Too much. As if such a thing existed. I kissed her forehead and told her, I promised you forever. I intend to keep it, she didn't reply. Her silence stayed with me longer than her words ever did. In the evenings, when the world grew quiet, I'd lie awake listening to her breathe. My chest ached with the thought of her absence, an ache so sharp it bordered on violence. Loving her was not gentle. It was consuming, absolute. If she ever broke her promise, what would become of us? Clara never voiced her own feelings as openly. She smiled, she played her role, but her gaze was often unreadable, elegant, distant, as if holding something back. I saw her, but I wasn't sure if I truly knew her. Still, I clung to my belief. Forever was ours. Even if I had to make it so. And that was how it began, with a promise too sharp to remain pure. Chapter 2. A Love with Cracks. From the very beginning, Clara knew how to command a room. Her elegance wasn't loud. It was quiet, deliberate. The sort of presence that made people lean in without realizing they were doing it. She read the world carefully, moved through it like someone who always had a plan. She was everything I adored, and everything I feared. To our neighbors, we were the couple who waved from the porch, wine glasses clinking in the evening light. But inside the walls of our home, the cracks began to form. Small at first, the kind you could ignore if you didn't look too closely. A disagreement over bills, a sharp sigh when I checked her phone, the faint edge in her voice when I asked why she stayed late at work. Daniel, she said once, setting down her fork mid-dinner, you watch me as if you're waiting for me to disappear. I smiled instead of answering. What could I say? That she was right? That my love had sharpened into suspicion? She was intelligent enough to sense it, and I think deep down she enjoyed it. The power of knowing I depended on her more than she depended on me. Nights were the hardest. In the dim glow of our bedroom lamp, our arguments softened into whispers, but the words lingered heavier than shouting ever could. You think I'd betray you? She asked one night, her head resting on the pillow beside mine. I think people get tempted, I murmured. And if someone tried to tempt me? Her tone was light, almost teasing. Then they wouldn't be around long. She chuckled, low and unsettling. Erase them, Daniel. The word clung to the air between us. Erase. She had said it playfully, but there was something in her eyes that suggested she wanted to know my answer. Yes, I replied. Too quickly. Too certain, silence followed. Only the hum of the night filled the gap, her breathing measured, mine unsteady. That conversation replayed in my head for days. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't even a plan, but it planted something neither of us dared to water aloud. The thought that love, in its purest and most desperate form, might require sacrifice. And maybe, just maybe, sacrifice could mean blood. From then on, small quarrels carried sharper edges. When I questioned her independence, she accused me of suffocating her. When she spent money without asking, I told her she was careless. Beneath it all, though, the darker undertone lingered, pulsing quietly like a second heartbeat. Clara never repeated the word erase. She didn't need to. The seed had been planted, and every time someone new entered our lives, a coworker, a friend, even a curious neighbor, I wondered how far her loyalty would stretch, how far mine already had, because love, once cracked, doesn't always shatter. Sometimes it reshapes into something sharper, something more dangerous, and for Clara and me, that reshaping had only just begun. Chapter 3. When Shadows Speak. The past has a way of creeping in when you least expect it. Ours arrived on a Thursday evening, the kind of night that should have been uneventful. Clara in the kitchen, slicing vegetables with her slow precision, me nursing a glass of bourbon by the window. That's when the knock came. When I opened the door, I knew immediately that he wasn't just some salesman or neighbor. He stood too close, his smile too familiar. His eyes moved past me, toward Clara. "Clara," he said, voice thick with nostalgia. "It's been a long time." Her knife stilled against the cutting board. For a moment, she didn't breathe. Then she set it down carefully, wiping her hands on a towel before walking into view. "Ethan," she murmured. The name hit me like a blade. Ethan. He spoke with the ease of someone who thought he still belonged. They talked about old memories, a life I hadn't been part of. And the longer I listened, the more the bourbon burned in my throat. When he finally left, my voice broke the silence. "Who the hell was that?" "Someone I used to know," Clara said calmly. Too calmly. The days after blurred into unease. Ethan started appearing again. At the cafe where Clara stopped for coffee, outside her office building. Once I saw his car parked across from our house. Every sighting twisted my stomach tighter. One night I confronted her. "You knew he was back. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I knew how you'd react," she answered. And she was right, it happened the following weekend. Ethan came to the house while I was outside. His tone was pleading, not threatening, but every word grated on me. He told me Clara deserved better, that she had been happiest before me. He reached for my shoulder, as if we were equals in this, as if he had the right. Something inside me snapped. My hands moved before thought could catch them. A struggle, a thud, his skull against the concrete. His body went limp, the sound of his last breath rattling the night. The world froze. I expected Clara to scream, to recoil, to finally see me as a monster. Instead, she stepped forward, gaze steady, almost unreadable. "We don't have much time," she said. Her calmness chilled me more than the blood on my hands. She fetched plastic sheeting, gloves, even whispered instructions as though she had rehearsed them. Together we dragged him into the garage, wrapped him and buried him beneath the dark soil of our backyard, while the stars looked down like silent witnesses. When it was over, I collapsed in the dirt, shaking. She knelt beside me, brushing soil from her palms. "You did what you had to," she whispered. But I knew that wasn't true. I hadn't had to. I had wanted to. The silence that followed us back into the house was unbearable. It wasn't the silence of peace or forgiveness. It was heavier, binding like chains wrapping tighter around our throats. We had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, and though no words were spoken, the first sin had already sealed itself into our marriage, more binding than any vow. The silence in our house grew heavier after Margaret's probing eyes. Clara wore her mask perfectly in public, but behind closed doors the fractures deepened. She shifted between sweetness and venom with unnerving precision. One moment her lips traced my jawline, whispering devotion. The next her words cut like glass, reminding me that I was nothing without her. I began to wonder if it was truly love that tethered me, or something darker. Every glance, every touch felt sharpened with intent. "You're restless again," she said one night, leaning against the doorway while I sat hunched over the kitchen table. Her tone was almost playful, but I heard the accusation beneath it. "I can't live like this," I muttered, staring at my hands. They still carried the memory of soil, of weight, of lives extinguished. "I can't keep burying what we've done." Clara moved closer, her footsteps soft, deliberate. "You think walking away saves you?" that the world will welcome you back with open arms. Her laugh was hollow. You'd crumble in a week. Without me, you're nothing but a man with blood on his hands. I lifted my head, anger breaking through fear. And what about you? Don't pretend you're some savior. You wanted James gone. You pushed me. Her hand struck the table with a force that startled me. The candles flickered, shadows dancing across her face. Don't you dare rewrite this, Daniel. We did it together. That makes us one. You can hate me all you want, but hate doesn't erase the graves in our yard. Her words twisted deep, burrowing into my ribs. I wanted to scream to tell her I didn't love her anymore. But the truth was tangled. I did love her, or at least I loved the power she held over me. The line between devotion and fear blurred until I couldn't separate them. You've betrayed me, I whispered, my throat tight. You've turned our marriage into a prison. Clara leaned down, her lips brushing my ear. Her voice was soft but deadly. If this is a prison, Daniel, then I am the only one holding the key. And if you ever try to leave, remember this. The moment you open your mouth, you don't just destroy me. You destroy yourself. Tears burned my eyes, but I held them back. She kissed the side of my face, a mockery of tenderness, sealing the argument not with resolution, but with chains. In that moment, I realized the truth. My love for Clara was inseparable from my fear of her. The pact we had spoken aloud bound us not with devotion, but with dread. Still, I stayed, because leaving her meant exposure, and exposure meant ruin. The house creaked with silence that night, each shadow whispering the same truth. There was no way out. The night Margaret disappeared, the air was unnervingly still. No crickets, no dogs barking, only the weight of silence pressing against the windows. Clara's hand wrapped around mine as if steadying me, though it felt more like a command than comfort. She's seen too much, she whispered, her eyes glinting in the pale wash of moonlight. We don't have a choice, but I knew there was a choice. There always had been. I could have walked away, told the truth, let the world unravel. Instead, I found myself in the backyard again, the shovel's handle slick with sweat, my ears straining against the muffled cries that clawed through the dark. Margaret's voice cut me open. The desperation, the disbelief. Please, you don't have to. Her words choked on the gag Clara forced between her lips. And then silence, a silence that buried itself deep inside my chest. The digging began. Each strike of the shovel tore through the earth like a heartbeat out of rhythm. The soil turned dark, damp, almost alive beneath the blade. I felt it clinging to my skin, dragging me deeper into something I no longer recognized as love or even survival. Clara worked beside me, her movements precise, efficient. She didn't falter, not once. In the glow of the moon, her face looked transformed, sharper, colder, radiant with a kind of energy I'd never seen before. Where I felt sickened, she seemed invigorated, her breath steady, her eyes almost shining. When the last mound of soil covered Margaret, I dropped the shovel, my knees sinking into the earth. My hands shook uncontrollably. I could still hear her muffled screams in my ears, as if the ground itself echoed them back. She's gone, I muttered, my voice breaking. God, Clara, she's gone. Clara crouched beside me, dirt streaking her pale arms. She touched my cheek with a gentleness that mocked the grave between us. No, Daniel, she whispered, her lips curling into a faint smile. She's part of us now. Another thread in the bond that makes us unbreakable. I stared at her, horror colliding with a strange, twisted awe. She wasn't the woman I'd married. Or maybe she had always been this, a survivor forged in cruelty, now fully unmasked. Sleep never came that night. Every creak of the house was Margaret's step. Every whisper of the wind carried her name. My dreams were soaked in soil, in blood, in the sound of earth falling back into itself. Clara, though, slept soundly beside me, her breathing calm, her body curled into mine as though nothing had happened. For the first time, I knew the truth. She was thriving in the darkness I could barely endure, and I, bound by fear, by guilt, by love twisted beyond recognition, was trapped in her design. The backyard grave was not just Margaret's, it was mine too. The morning after Margaret's disappearance, the sun rose far too bright for a house buried in shadows. Clara brewed coffee as if nothing had happened, humming softly, her hair tied neatly, her dress crisp. I sat at the table, hands trembling around a mug that had long gone cold. My mind replayed the sound of earth filling the grave, the way it had seemed to swallow me whole. Then came the knock, firm, measured, unforgiving. Clara didn't flinch. She looked at me, smiled faintly, and whispered, "Breathe." Two men stood on the porch, Detectives Harris and Vega. Harris, older, sharp-eyed, carried the weary authority of someone who had seen too many lies. Vega, younger, quieter, observed everything with unsettling patience. Their badges caught the sunlight as Clara welcomed them in with the grace of a hostess. "We're following up," Harris said, his voice casual but clipped. "One of your neighbors, Margaret Hill, hasn't been seen since last night. Thought we'd check in." My pulse thundered in my ears. I tried to speak, but Clara's hand brushed mine under the table, a warning cloaked in tenderness. She took control. "Oh, Margaret," she said warmly, feigning concern. "She mentioned going to visit her sister last week." "Did she not tell you that, Daniel?" Her eyes locked on mine, daring me to contradict her. I swallowed hard, nodding too quickly. "Yes, she did." Harris's gaze lingered on me, skeptical. Vega scribbled in a small notebook, his pen scratching like claws against my nerves. Every word I spoke felt like an admission. Every glance toward the backyard was a spotlight on the grave. "Strange," Harris murmured. "Her sister says she never arrived." Clara tilted her head, her expression softening into a mask of concern. "That is strange. But you know, Margaret, she liked her independence. Always came and went as she pleased. We worried sometimes, didn't we, dear?" Her performance was flawless. I, on the other hand, felt like a cracked mirror, reflecting guilt at every angle. My answers were short, stilted, betraying the storm raging inside. Harris noticed. Of course he did. After what felt like hours, the detective stood to leave. Harris paused at the door, his eyes narrowing. "If you think of anything at all, give us a call." The door clicked shut, but the silence that followed was louder than their questions. Clara turned to me, her smile fading into a blade. "You almost ruined everything," she hissed, her voice low, venomous. "I can't do this," I whispered back, my throat tight. "I can't lie for you anymore." Her laughter was soft, chilling. "Not for me, Daniel, for us. Remember what happens if you stop." The house felt smaller, suffocating. No longer a home, but a cage. Between us, silence grew sharp, cutting deeper than words. Outside, I could almost feel Harris and Vega's eyes still watching, waiting for the first crack to split us apart. The dirt had barely settled on Ethan's grave when I realized something had shifted between us. I thought the guilt would swallow Clara whole, but instead, she moved through the days with a new clarity, as if the act had freed something inside her. Her laughter returned, sharper than before, and her gaze carried a weight I couldn't meet for long. At night, when I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan's face. I heard the crack of his skull against concrete. Clara, though, seemed almost untouched. She touched my cheek, soothed me, whispered that we had done what was necessary. Her voice was steady, rehearsed, like she had been waiting for this moment. It was then I began to wonder about the life she lived before me, the shadows. I never asked her to reveal. Clara's childhood was not the polished image she sometimes painted. She spoke in fragments. A father who left before she turned 10. A mother who traded affection for liquor bottles. Nights spent listening to shouting through thin apartment walls. She learned early that no one protected her unless she seized control. I remember the way she said it one night, voice low against the pillow. "If you don't hold the knife, someone else will use it on you." Those words clung to me like a curse. I started to see how effortlessly she bent me. When doubt crept in, she kissed it away. When fear clawed at my chest, she reminded me that fear meant weakness, and weakness got you killed. Every argument ended with me apologizing, even when my gut screamed otherwise. The second victim came almost naturally. He was a colleague of mine, James. Charming, reckless, the type of man who thrived on rumors. He had been at our house once, joking too easily with Clara, his eyes lingering too long. At the office, he teased me about how lucky I was, about how a woman like Clara must be hard to satisfy. I laughed it off, but the poison stayed. Clara saw it festering in me. She leaned in one night, her lips grazing my ear. "Men like him don't stop, they take. And then they take more." Her hand guided mine as if testing my pulse, feeling the tremor in my fingers. She didn't tell me outright what she wanted, but she didn't have to. By morning, the idea had already taken root. When James disappeared 2 weeks later, there were no witnesses, no sudden bursts of rage like with Ethan. This time it was deliberate, silent, a piece orchestrated by Clara and played through my trembling hands. The soil in our yard darkened again, swallowing another secret. Afterward, she kissed me like never before, slow, deep, victorious. Her eyes shone with a fire that made my chest ache. "This," she whispered against my lips, "is what forever really means." I realized then that our love no longer lived in wedding vows or warm photographs. It lived in shadows, in silence, in the bodies beneath our feet. Clara had woven her web, and I was tangled too tightly to ever escape. The house was quiet that night, save for the flicker of candles burning low on the dining table. Clara had insisted on the ritual. No lights, no distractions, just us, sitting across from each other in the glow that made her face seem sharper. Her eyes almost predatory. I had avoided her gaze since James's disappearance. My stomach churned at the memory, at the weight of the shovel in my hands, at the silence that followed when the earth closed over him. But Clara didn't waver. She poured the wine slowly, deliberately, the ruby liquid catching the flame as though mocking me. "You haven't been sleeping," she said softly. Her tone wasn't accusatory, but it carried something heavier, a statement of fact, a door to confession. "I can't stop seeing them," I admitted, voice breaking. "Ethan, James, they don't leave me." "It feels like you're guilty?" She leaned forward, her lips curling in something between pity and triumph. "Daniel, guilt is only for the weak. You did what you had to do. You did it for us." I shook my head, desperate, fingers tightening around the stem of the glass. "No, Clara, I did it because I lost control. Because you pushed." Her eyes hardened instantly. "Careful," she said. The word cut sharper than a blade. "You want to blame me, but who swung the shovel? Who chose silence afterward? Who kissed me with dirt still on his hands?" The room seemed to close in. I felt the blood drain from my face as she rose, moving around the table, her shadow flickering against the wall. She placed her hands on my shoulders, cool and firm, anchoring me in place. "You think this makes you weak," she whispered into my ear, "but it makes you mine. Don't you see? Love isn't about flowers and rings. Love is about what you're willing to bury with me, what you're willing to become for me." I wanted to argue, to scream, to tell her that none of this was love. But when her lips brushed my neck, when her fingers slid under my chin and forced me to look at her, words died in my throat. "You're afraid," she continued, her gaze unblinking. "Afraid because you know the truth. There is no Daniel without Clara, not anymore. Our lives are bound by what we've done. You can't undo it. You can't run from it. You can only stay." Tears pricked my eyes. "And if I don't?" Her smile was slow, devastating. "Then you'll carry it alone. And we both know you can't survive that." The silence stretched. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized she was right, or at least she had convinced me she was. I had no escape. I nodded, a broken motion, sealing myself inside her cage. "Then it's us always." Clara's lips curved in satisfaction. She kissed me deeply, tasting the surrender she had demanded all along. When she pulled away, her whisper was final. "Binding, bound by blood, forever." The flame sputtered as if the room itself had heard the vow. The morning after our whispered vow, Clara suggested something unexpected. "We need to be seen," she said calmly, buttering her toast as though nothing had changed. "Barbecues, wine nights, smiles. If we retreat, people notice." And so we became the golden couple again. The lawn was trimmed, the grill polished, the wine glasses filled with practiced grace. Neighbors filtered into our backyard, laughing, complimenting the roses, praising Clara's cooking. We played our parts flawlessly, as if the soil behind the house didn't hold secrets too dark for daylight. Clara wore her summer dress, the one that made her look untouchable. Her smile flashed at the right moments, but I saw the stiffness in it. The way her hand sometimes lingered too long on her glass, or her laugh faltered half a beat late. To anyone else, she looked radiant. To me, she looked rehearsed. I wasn't much better. Every burst of laughter from across the fence made my chest tighten. When someone asked about James, his sudden absence at the office, I stammered too quickly. Clara smoothed it over with ease, explaining that he'd been offered a project out of town. Her lies were silk, mine were jagged stone. It was during one of these evenings that I noticed her, Margaret, the widow from next door. She had always been kind, polite, but now her gaze lingered. She watched Clara with a sharpness that unsettled me, as if peeling away the layers of performance. She asked simple questions, but her tone was heavy with implication. "You both must be exhausted," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Always hosting, always perfect. Funny how you never seem to slip." Clara laughed it off, brushing Margaret's hand lightly, but I saw the tension in her jaw. Later, as we cleared the dishes, Clara leaned in, her whisper slicing through me. "She's watching us." I wanted to dismiss it, but Margaret's eyes had burned into me all evening. The way she lingered near the back fence, staring at the patch of garden where the soil never seemed quite level, made bile rise in my throat. That night, when the guests were gone, I stood at the window, watching her porch light flicker on. She was outside, watering plants that didn't need watering, her gaze cutting across the darkness straight into ours. Clara slipped her arm around my waist, her voice steady but cold. "If she digs too deep," she murmured, "she'll end up like the others." Her words struck like a verdict, and I felt the mask we wore tightening around us, suffocating, fragile. The station's walls were painted in dull gray, the kind of color that eats at time. They sat us apart, but I could still hear Clara's heels against the linoleum as she was escorted down the hall. A door closed. Silence followed. Detective Harris faced me first. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He simply sat across the table, his eyes fixed on mine, and let the weight of my own conscience do the work. A small tape recorder clicked on. "Tell me about Margaret Hill," he said softly. I opened my mouth, but nothing came. My throat felt cemented. Sweat ran down my temple. Harris waited. Seconds bled into minutes. The silence crushed me more than words could. "You see?" He leaned in, voice low. "People don't just vanish. Not women like her. Neighbors always leave traces, and sometimes the people closest to them." Know why? My hands shook violently. I thought of the dirt under my fingernails, the soil clinging to my boots, the way the earth had swallowed her last scream. My chest tightened until the words clawed out of me, jagged and broken. I didn't want to. She wouldn't stop asking questions. "Clara," the tape captured every stammer, every ragged breath. Harris's eyes sharpened, but he didn't press. He let me spill, let my guilt trip over itself. Bits of confession fell like shattered glass. The fight, the grave, the pact. Through the thin wall, I knew Clara was listening. I could almost feel her silence radiating back, cold and absolute. Later, Harris left me slumped in the chair, sweat soaking through my shirt, and switched rooms. Clara sat straight-backed, hands folded, eyes clear as glass. Detective Vega spoke to her, his tone probing, coaxing. But she offered nothing. "Your husband says you were there," Vega said, her lips curved just slightly. "My husband says many things. He is fragile. Where I unraveled, she built walls. Where I bled words, she offered none. The hours dragged like a blade across skin. They asked. She refused. They circled. She held steady. At the end of the fourth hour, the contrast was undeniable. I was wrecked, trembling, eyes red, muttering apologies into my palms. Clara was untouched, her silence heavier than confession, her gaze slicing through the glass as they escorted her past me. For a brief moment, our eyes met. I searched for the woman I once believed I loved, the one who smiled under the wedding arch, who whispered forever into my ear. But what I found was something colder, something sharper than steel. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her look said everything. "You broke first. You ended us." As the officers led her away, I collapsed forward, sobbing into the metal table. The pact we had carved into blood and soil was no more. Forever had ended in 4 endless hours.